Welcome to the Music Nut Program. I'm John. Thank you so much for joining me today. And welcome to the latest edition of It's Thin Lizzy Thursday. On today's show, I will discuss Thin Lizzy's two official live albums from their lifetime, 1978's Live and Dangerous, and 1983's Life, also called Life Live. Okay, Live and Dangerous. This came out on June 2nd, 1978. It was released on Vertigo Records in the UK, Mercury Records in Canada, Warner Brothers Records in the United States. This would hit number 84 on the Billboard Top 200 albums, and it would hit number 2 on the top albums in the UK. It would give them a platinum certification. The only platinum album in the UK for Thin Lizzy. They have a string of gold albums. It did not certify here in the United States. In my opinion, with all the reissues that have come out, the growing stature of this album over the years is one of the best double live albums from the 1970s at a time when live albums were very much in vogue and were very, very popular. I believe this has had gone gold at this point. Furthermore, in 1978, and as long as we had vinyl records as the main format, it was a most popular format in 1978, and it stayed that way for a few more years. By 1991, there weren't too many albums coming out on vinyl. But two album sets were considered two units, two record sets, I should say. Two records would count as two albums. I'm thinking if you count what was being sold back then and the posthumous releases, the growing stature, this has to be a gold album in the United States now. Has to be. So this album was recorded at a variety of shows. And as time has gone on, that amount of shows has increased. The performances were taken from 3 nights, November 14, November 15, November 16, 1976, at Hammersmith Odeon in London, England. That's why on the song Baby Drives Me Crazy, when Phil introduces the band, he says, "Thank you for coming out tonight," or 2 nights or 3 nights. They did a 3 night stint. They also recorded at Seneca College in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on October 28, 1977. As time went on, we would learn that there were also performances from the Tower Theater in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on October 20 and October 21, 1977, as well as the Rainbow Theater in London, England, on March 29, 1978. This was recorded during those dates. It was produced by the band along with Tony Visconti, who would produce the studio albums that surround this release, Bad Reputation and Black Rose, A Rock Legend, respectively. The band on this show, or on this album, Phil Lynott, bass guitar, lead vocals, Scott Gorham, guitars and backing vocals, Brian Downey on drums and percussion, Brian Robertson on guitars and backing vocals. We also have a couple guest spots here. We have John Earl from the Graham Parker Band, who plays saxophone on Dance in the Moonlight. And we also have Huey Lewis, who was with the band Clover at that time, and later would find a tremendous amount of success, particularly in the United States, during the 1980s as part of Huey Lewis and the News on harmonica. So let's go over the tracks on here. And I don't have too many notes here. I'm going to go over some of the performances, the songs that were released. Jailbreak, of course, was the biggest album that Thin Lizzy would have, and it opens up with a magnificent version of Jailbreak, as well as Emerald. Now they put Emerald here near the beginning of the album, but during the shows, it was a lot later in the set. Both strong versions. Southbound is the next song from Bad Reputation, and I really like this version a lot. The unison guitars really shine on here and sounds wonderful live, particularly at the end where they end it with those unison guitar lines, I think is magical. Rosalie, this is from Fighting originally, and this is a Bob Seger song, of course, that then Lizzy made their own. And it says Rosalie slash cowgirl song because they go into a little bit of cowboy song and then they go right back into Rosalie. This definitely deserves to be on the album. It's become a live staple. It was a live staple for them. And when I went to see them in 2011, they did this song as well. Dancing in the Moonlight, which was the single at the time from Bad Reputation. And they go right into Massacre. And I think that's magical. I love when Thin Lizzy just goes right into another song. And I'll talk about that in about a minute or two. Strong version of that. Massacre Destroys on here. And then we have Still in Love with You from Nightlife, which is very elegant, very well played. And we got Johnny the Fox meets Jimmy the Weed from Johnny the Fox. Very funky, very strong. And then we have Cowboy Song from Jailbreak. Magical on here. Phil's persona and his charisma on full display. Going right, stop on a dime, right into Boys Are Back in Town, which is awesome. And to this day, when they do play outs, they still play it that way. They do It's the Life for Me, and then that loud guitar chord of Boys Are Back in Town. And it's like a perfect storm when they do that, because then the fans just get so into it. Check out their show from the Sydney Opera House that's on YouTube. That is now part of the compilation that came out last year called A Song for While I'm Away, which is a CD, DVD slash Blu-ray set. But they have the concert on YouTube. Check that out and see that live crowd go apeshit. Awesome. Don't Believe a Word. Very short and menacing, just like the studio version. I'll go over another version of that song when I talk about Life. Got a great version of Warrior on here also from Jailbreak. Jailbreak, very well represented. We got 5 songs from that album on here. Excellent version of that. Then we go into Are You Ready, which was a new song for them at that time. It would later open shows for Thin Lizzy. It would also turn into a song where Phil would introduce the band and give them all their little spotlight. This was a band that, I'm sorry, this song was later covered by Rollins' band on the album Get Some Go Again. And we got Suicide from Fighting, which is a blistering version. And we have Sha La La from Nightlife, which gives us a pretty good drum solo here. Not very, very long. It's a great solo, but it's not like the 5-minute drum solos, which were becoming the norm at that point. Anyway, Brian's drumming, as always, it kills. Then we have Baby Drives Me Crazy, which is more of like a rave up type song, a shuffle. And this worked on this album as the way to introduce the band, including Huey Lewis, who was on harmonica. And then we end the set with The Rocker, which was on Vagabonds of the Western World and was described by many as the first time Phil really came into his own as this wonderful persona, charisma out the wazoo. It's the showstopper tune. It's been used as an encore many times. So this album has been called one of the great double live albums in rock history. I can't argue that at all. It's also been said there's a lot of overdubs on here. Well, at that time, there was a lot of overdubs on live albums. Does it feel live? That's the litmus test for me. It feels live. Later on, in fact, not too long ago, they put out an 8 CD box set version of this. And if you listen to that compared to this, and it went over all the shows that were recorded for the tour, at least most of them, I believe, there were too many overdubs. If there were overdubs, it may have been more in the vocal department, but killer live album. 10 out of 10. You can use this as your segue into Thin Lizzy if you don't have an album, in my opinion. Now, it's not going to cover the whole career. They did great stuff early on. They did great stuff after this. Black Rose, Chinatown, Renegade, Thunder and Lightning. They all have great songs on them. But as a live album, this works very well. And I believe this should be at least gold certified in the United States by now. Now, 1983, we get Life Live. And now this is a 2-disc set. I'll show you that. There's the second one right here. These plastic inserts for the double ones, they're not well made. But anyway, this was to be Thin Lizzy's farewell tour. It would be the last tour that Phil would do with the band because we would lose them in January of 1986. So for on here, we have the Thunder and Lightning Band. We have Phil Lynott on bass and lead vocals. We have Brian Downey on drums and percussion. We have Darren Wharton on keyboards and backing vocals. We have Scott Gorham on guitars and backing vocals, and John Sykes on guitars and backing vocals. Now, this album did not fare as well in the States or the UK, and it was released on those same labels that I mentioned before. This hit number 185 on the US Top 200 album charts. It only hit number 29 on the UK album charts. It did not certify. Now, as I mentioned, this was to be the farewell tour. It wasn't that way, of course, because Thin Lizzy got back together here and there over the years. I saw them in 2011 when Ricky Warlock was the lead vocalist, and they had Vivian Campbell in, standing next to Scott Gorham in the lead guitar spot, along with Brian Downey, and they had Marco Mendoza on bass. So they've gotten back together here and there after Phil has passed on. These shows were, from best of my research, all filmed from the Hammersmith Odeon from March 10, 1983 through March 12, 1983. So again, we had a 3-night stint at the Hammersmith Odeon. Now, this was for the Thunder and Lightning album, which would be their last studio album. The sound quality on a lot of these songs, I think, is improved. You can really hear Phil's bass on these songs better than you can live and Dangerous, especially when the song is starting with a bass intro. Phil's vocals aren't as strong, and I've talked about that on the studio albums that I've reviewed in this series. The vocals on Live and Dangerous are strong throughout. Here, not so much, but the clarity of the instruments is clear on this album. You can definitely hear the difference between them, and the space between the notes as well. Thunder and Lightning very well represented on this album. If you are a fan of Thunder and Lightning, you probably love this album. We have 5 songs from Thunder and Lightning on here. Thunder and Lightning considered a heavy metal Thin Lizzy album. We start out with the title track, and we're just off to the races. And that just segues right into Waiting for an Alibi from Black Rose. Awesome version. And we go into Jailbreak. I think these 3 songs right in a row, in the order they're placed, works perfectly. Of course, Phil's vocals not as strong on Jailbreak compared to Live and Dangerous. They're all still strong versions. And as I had mentioned on Thunder and Lightning, while I wasn't a fan of a lot of the songs on Thunder and Lightning, well, more than half I really, really like, but there's a few songs I'm not hot into. John Sykes really brought an energy to this band. Even if we lost the unison guitars, which I admit I like the unison guitars, but he did bring a ball of energy, and that's really apparent on this album. Then we have Baby Please Don't Go. I'm not a big fan of this song at all, as I talked about in the Thunder and Lightning episode. I looked into the tour dates on Setlist FM. They played This Is the One that night that they recorded this album. I would have took This Is the One and I would have put that right in the Baby Please Don't Go spot. In fact, the sequencing on here is really interesting because some of it matches, but there's some songs on, there's one song in particular on the second disc that was played much earlier in the sets. And there were some here that were definitely played later. And I think that kind of hurts the album. I think that some, it's the sequencing sometimes doesn't work on here. I'll just say that. Holy War from Thunder and Lightning, very cool version of that. And then we go right into Renegade, and that bass sounds so good on here. And just to let you know, we do have 3 songs on here that were recorded on a Renegade tour with Snowy White. And one of them is Renegade. And next one we got is Hollywood, also from Renegade. And he would be featured later here, as well as some other musicians that were in Thin Lizzy at one point, but I just gave you the main musicians on the album when I introduced it. We have Got to Give It Up from Black Rose. I think this is a good song to put on here. I would have went with Do Anything You Want To. We could have brought out those kettle drums on stage just like they did when I saw them in 2011, but Got to Give It Up is cool. Angel of Death is killer on here, and it segues right into Are You Ready? That is another showstopper moment to me. The fact that they went right into that kills. Sometimes I wonder, should Are You Ready be used as a way to announce the band? Yeah, I'm not sure because I think it works really well on some of the shows they've done. Sometimes they use Are You Ready as an opener, but it works very well on here. And that closes out disc 1. Disc 2, we have a repeat from Live and Dangerous in Boys Are Back in Town, but it's a very energetic version and the crowd's really into it. Cold Sweat from Thunder and Lightning absolutely kills. Don't Believe a Word. We start with the slow version that Gary Moore recorded on Back on the Streets in 1978 with Phil and Brian Downey on that recording. And it's like that for like the first 3.5 minutes or so, and then the pace picks up. I don't think this song works as well as that 2 minute and 20-second version that you got on Johnny the Fox and Live and Dangerous. I think it works better when it's short and poignant and hard hitting than it does as a slower blues song. We have Killer on the Loose from Chinatown, which is the only song on here from Chinatown, which is a disappointment for me. I'm not high on Chinatown, but I think the first half of that album is very strong. At least we have the top 10 single and Killer on the Loose. I would have put the title song for Chinatown on here as well. And then we have The Sun Goes Down. Now, this is the song I was talking about before that was normally played earlier in the set on this album. And I don't just I don't agree with the sequencing on here because Don't Believe a Word is slow. Then Killer on a Loose, we pick it back up. Then we go in another slow song with The Sun Goes Down. Although I like the song a lot. The sequencing could have been better on here. Then the last 4 songs, we're bringing out some members of the family on here. We have Emerald from Jailbreak and Brian Robertson and Scott Gorham do their guitar magic on here with the soloing back and forth at the end, which is awesome. We got a killer version of Black Rose, Rouge and Dub. Gary Moore's on this one. He does that wonderful solo. Note for note, it kills. Vocally, not quite as strong. We're not getting the vocals from the lyrics from Shenandoah on this version like we did on the original. But it is a strong version. We got Still in Love with. This is even slower than the Nightlife version. I do prefer the Nightlife version more. And then we got the show-stopping closer, the rocker again. And now we got Phil, Scott, Brian Downey, Darren Wharton, John Sykes, joined by Gary, Brian Robertson, and Eric Bell. We get Bell on that long guitar solo on there. We say about the rocker, that was when Phil really introduced himself to the world. To me, this is where Eric Bell really introduced himself to the world. Fantastic solo on this and a great way to end the album. I'll tell you what, Live and Dangerous gets all the accolades. Don't sleep on this one. This is play with a lot of passion and fire. We don't get as many unison guitars as we do in the classic Thin Lizzy. But if you like the later albums, especially Thunder and Lightning, you'll really dig this release. It's well recorded. The band is on point. Strong performances musically, certainly. Definitely, definitely worth the purchase if you like the heavy metal Thin Lizzy. I gave Live and Dangerous a 10. I'd give this an 8.5. The only things I'm not too crazy about is the songs aren't quite as strong as before, but they, for the most part, picked the best songs from those later albums and a little bit in the sequencing. That's, I mean, that's just nitpicking a little bit, to be honest. 8.5 I'd give to Life Live. Excuse me. Some of the other posthumous live albums that are out there are decent. I do like a song for While I'm Away, which was originally The Boys Are Back in Town live in Australia. Later came out as Thin Lizzy's Live at the Sydney Opera House. Now it's part of the CD, DVD, Blu-ray version that I discussed before. That's the performance that's on YouTube from the Bad Reputation tour, but Gary Moore was already in the band, so they're already playing some songs from Black Rose. I think that's a very strong posthumous live album from Thin Lizzy. You have Live in UK 75, that's out. That one, it's very raw. Some of the songs, they're kind of going through, they're not fully formed yet. The guitar work on is very strong, although on one song I could clearly hear a guitar that's out of tune. And Phil's vocals, I mean, at first they're not too strong. Eventually they do become strong. It's decent. If you like the the vagabonds of the Western world nightlife fighting era, that's definitely worth hearing. Still Dangerous is out there. Now, some of the songs that are on Still Dangerous would be out on Live and Dangerous, but we didn't know that yet. That album was released in 2008 or 2009, I believe. Those performances were those from the Tower Theater in Philadelphia in October of 77. So what's on there that isn't on Live and Dangerous is pretty good. Bad Reputation's on that version. I always thought Bad Reputation should be on Live and Dangerous. I always thought that was the one big track that was missing for me. I always thought Bad Reputation should be on there before She Drives Me Crazy. And then maybe use Are You Ready as a way to introduce the band, like they did on the show from Sydney Opera House that's now out there on A Song for While I'm Away, which is also a documentary because there's a part of it is a show and there's a nice documentary on there on Phil Lynott as well. So, and there are other ones out there. One Night Only, which John Sykes does the lead vocals on. There's a few other live albums out there too, and some of them which were part of well, at least I know one of them was part of the Live and Dangerous 8 CD box set. Would have been the Live at Hammersmith show from 76. So, what do you think of these albums? Do you think Live and Dangerous is one of the best live albums by a rock band ever recorded? Do you like the song selection on there? Are there other songs on there that should be on there and some taken out? And do you feel the same way about Life? Have you heard the Life album? And if you have, what are your thoughts on it? What are your thoughts on Phil ending the band at that point? Do you think they should have gone on? What do you think of John Sykes in Thin Lizzy, and as well as his performances on Life? Please let me know in the comments. Just to give you some programming notes, I put out a new album after show last night, which would have been December 25th, 2024. This album after is about the Wallflowers and their 2000 album Breach, which followed their breakthrough album Bringing Down the Horse. I will have a top 10 albums of 2024 show coming out this coming weekend, which would be December 28 or December 29. Not sure when I'm going to put it out, but I'll definitely put it out this weekend. I'm just trying to compile the list right now and go over the order. So be on the lookout for that. I'll also have some album after shows and album war shows coming up in 2025. Next Thursday, January 1, 2025, I will give you my ranking of the 12 Thin Lizzy studio albums. So I'm filming this on December 25. Merry Christmas to all of you watching and to your families and to your communities. Do what you love, and I'll talk to you soon.